Is it still safe to give birth on the NHS? Is what I was thinking when my waters broke at 35 weeks. I rushed to hospital, to the emergency department in the NHS, and this was my experience. This is what giving birth on the NHS in 2025 looks like. Apologies for the decorations, it was Hugo's birthday. Ta-da! In theory, the NHS is amazing. World-class doctors, amazing maternity care, access for everyone. But in theory isn't always in reality, particularly when you're in an emergency situation with a preterm labour. But the truth is, the NHS is a big game of postcode lottery and postcode roulette. It very much depends on what hospital you're in, what funding they get, and then what specialties are supported there. Is it a teaching hospital? Is it not? The wards are often underfunded, and everyone's kind of just doing the best they can with the resources they have. In the UK, if you're not from the UK, the NHS is free, meaning that it is state funded. The pillars of the NHS is that it is free at the point of service, is the official declaration. But yes, I know there's going to be a million comments saying, it's not free, we pay for it, da, 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 da. I'm aware, if you watch my visa video, I have paid the NHS surcharge 4 times. It's a lot, I get it. But free at the point of service. I will be using the word free from the rest of the video, but yes, I'm aware of the funding, and I just wanted to put a disclaimer here so we don't have to comment. Before I even give birth, it's important to discuss what the pregnancy was and what was my experience with the pregnancy. Now, I, for context, gave birth and had my prenatal care at St Thomas in London. I may have chosen it for this view. I regret nothing on that decision. It's also a world-class hospital, and it has a children's hospital associated with it in the Evelina, which is why I chose that hospital. I would go there for my appointments. I had an odd scan at 12 weeks. I can do a whole video on that. I'm not going to spend forever discussing that nightmare scenario. Essentially, he showed some risk factors, and I had to do additional testing. What is great is that they found it, and that we did the additional testing, and I had the lead consultant there doing an amniocentesis for me, which is the big needle in the belly. You know, it wasn't some trainee, it wasn't a nurse who's like not particularly trained at that. And I also was able to get referrals for the neonatal cardiology, so fetal cardiology. I had to get heart scans on the baby to make sure there was no heart defects, which there wasn't, yay. And I had an amniocentesis, so I had extra care, that was additional. So that, once again, all free, which was fantastic. It was nerve-wracking. I think with these things it's always hard because they can't be too emotional about everything, but they also have to be somewhat emotional because it's quite an emotional thing to come to terms with the fact that the pregnancy might not be viable. Obviously it was versus the party, but look, at the time we weren't laughing, let's just say that. On top of that, I would go to midwife appointments. I went to one roughly once a month, and then it got much quicker when I got closer to delivering. Now, this is where I think the care could be better. Initially, the appointments are just doing your blood pressure, they take a blood sample, they do a urine test to check for UTIs and things like that, and any infection. That's fine. I did have I kept getting an infection marker, but every time they sent it off, nothing came of that, and we do wonder to this day if that's why I had a preterm labour. And then I will say the other thing that I think is less than ideal, and once again, I went to quite a well-funded hospital, so I can imagine if people's experience will differ dramatically depending on what hospital you go to. I didn't have a glucose test. They only give you the diabetes glucose test if you have a history or family history of it. Now, why that is a problem is that when I was 30 weeks, I started getting sugar in my urine, which is an indicator of gestational diabetes. I didn't have any other signs except for that at the end, and at that point I was over 30 weeks, so they don't do the glucose test at that point because it's too late. So what I had to do is I had to get a diabetes kit, and I had to prick my finger 4 times a day for 2 weeks and keep a log of it, and then they measured it. It's just, it was annoying. You know, if we'd done the glucose test and I knew I had gestational diabetes, I wouldn't have had to prick my finger, because it actually, I'm sure there's people out there who have much worse chronic conditions, or maybe even diabetes, and they have to do it themselves. But there's just something about being self-inflicted and having to do it. It's so, I'm so bad. Like, I gave birth, which you'll hear about, which was painful, and I'm for some reason whinging more about the glucose testing. But there's something about taking your blood 4 times a day. It was just an avoidable pain we could have avoided. Then the other thing I did find concerning was that I did get really itchy, which can be, is it OCT? OCT? Basically, your liver enzymes are malfunctioning and causing bile buildup, which can cause itchy skin, which was honestly the worst symptom. I hated that so much. I had to put my feet in cold water. It was terrible. And I did the blood test and everything came up, you know, too high, but I kept getting told that's normal for pregnancy. But then I was like, but I'm not having a normal pregnancy because I'm so damn itchy. So I never got a proper response from that, which was annoying. So that were the only 2 complaints I had, was that I think I should have been scanned more, or paid more attention to for the OTC, and then also for the gestational, which, considering I ended up having a preterm labour, I may have also had the hospital, and this is just specific to my hospital, it's a tall building, and the maternity ward is on the 8th floor. So when you're in labour, you have to get in a lift and go up, which in St Thomas in peak hour is an absolute nightmare. But I wasn't in peak hour, it was 4 AM, but still. And I also had to, parking is not really an option. They've got tiniest car park. So I would walk from Waterloo Station, which is a 10-minute walk, which once again, when you're not heavily pregnant, fine. Also, it was the middle of summer. So I went on my I think it was my last midwife appointment that I ended up going to. I walked from the station, went up to the 8th floor, and then they said my blood pressure was really high and it wasn't coming down and all this. And we couldn't tell if it was the heat, if it was the walk, if it was anything else. Like, so that's another thing. I'm like, did I have hypertension that was therefore missed because of the circumstances, and that caused my preterm. So there's all these questions because I don't feel like because I was low risk, so it was my first pregnancy, I didn't get a lot of attention in those areas, and I think the benefit of the doubt was given when perhaps it shouldn't have. This is the birth bit. At 35 weeks plus 3, I went home. I was rushing home because I really needed to go to the toilet. I had to do a wee, and I just didn't want to pull over and stop, so I couldn't be bothered. Also, pregnant lady, you always need to pee, so I was just like, I'm just gonna wait till I get home. So I kind of rushed in the house. Daniel's playing Fortnite. I kind of beeline straight for the toilet, and I went to the toilet and I was doing my business, and then it just didn't stop. I yelled out to him. I was like, Daniel, come here, and he came, and then the door was still closed, and I was like, I think my water broke, and he was like, what's it look like? And I'm like kicking the door down, like he's trying to give me dignity, and I'm like, no dignity, look at this, look at this now, tell me what you think. And so then we were like, yeah, we've definitely got to go to the hospital. And I was in, and it was like properly, like, this is kind of graphic, but it was literally like weeing myself. Like Daniel, I went out to the car and I had a towel and stuff, and I got one of those urine cups to catch some to show the nurses. And Daniel's like, oh, is it still coming out? And I just like moved the towel and it was just like, whoosh, like non-stop. It's like, if you're ever wondering what water breaking is, it's literally just like, you really need to pee non-stop. Like, and it just does not stop coming out. It didn't hurt, I will say, there's no pain, just scary. So I sat on a towel, we went to the emergency room, triage, they said come in, I brought the baby bag. Did I bring the baby? I think we went and got the baby stuff just in case. And they admitted me, and I had this amazing, amazing nurse, doctor actually, sorry. The nurses were great too, but the midwives were great. But I had the consultant doctor, she was a lovely lady, and she explained to me, because I was supposed to have a C-section at 39 weeks or something, and this was 35. She said, look, we can do the C-section, but every week earlier you are from full term, the risks of respiratory intervention, so needing to be incubated, double. So if you're at full term, it's like 1 to 2%. But the week before that, it's like 4%, etc., etc. So by the time we got down to, 35 weeks, we were looking at roughly about a 20% chance of him needing to be incubated, which I didn't want to do. I felt that was too high personally. So my attitude was I was going to attempt to push and see what happened. And if it didn't happen, I had a C-section, I can say I tried. That was my logic. Regardless, I was in the triage. They were monitoring the baby. His heart rate did dip ever so slightly once, which was a bit scary when the nurses came running in. And because of that dip, they kept me. So they put me into the antenatal unit. So that is where women who are not in labour but have to be admitted for various reasons. So it's all pregnant women who are there for other reasons. So I stayed in that ward from Wednesday to Friday. So we stayed there for 3 days, 2 nights. Those beds are so uncomfortable. It was like a kind of like a padded chair but into a bed. So like truly so uncomfortable. And Daniel was in like a reclining chair and he stayed with me. And so all they did was monitor the blood pressure and all that normal checks that they do with you there. Once again, I was just still gushing non-stop because apparently, and I didn't know this, so you know, you never know, your waters will constantly try and replenish, but because there's obviously like a break, it will just keep coming up. So they were basically like, we're going to try and keep, we're not going to induce you because you're early. We want to try and keep the baby in as long as possible. If you get to 37 weeks, then we can look at taking them out by force. But other than then, we're just going to keep them in. And they also gave me antibiotics to stop any infection because that's the risk of water breaking is infection. Because normally when your waters break, they deliver within 24 hours, but not if you're preterm. So yeah, so we stayed there till Friday. I got discharged Friday night. We left and we got home at about 8 p.m. And I was like happy to be sleeping in my own comfy bed because, as I said, that bed was not comfortable. So we got home, went to bed, etc. And then at 4 a.m. I woke up with stomach. Contractions feel like period pain but in waves. So like you'll get like, say you have like really bad period aches, that'll last for like a day or something. This is like really bad period ache and it goes away. And really bad period ache and it goes away. So I went to the toilet. It's common part of the story. At 4 a.m. I went to the toilet, also not unusual as a pregnant lady. I felt the pain. And I was like waiting, and then it came back in another wave, and I was like, all right, Daniel, I want to go to the hospital, I'm scared. I'd rather go and be sent home than give birth on this bathroom floor. At this point, it wasn't too painful. It like just felt like period pain. It wasn't dramatic. And then as we were driving to the hospital, I was a bit scared, and I was, you know, it's too soon, it's too soon. And Daniel, bless him, was so kind and was like, it'll be fine, you know. And then they were like, you're gonna meet your baby tonight. When we got there, I will say I felt the contractions were getting more painful as the drive. Then we pulled up to the hospital. I had to get out of the car before we could park because the parking spaces are so narrow that I can't get out pregnant, which is super annoying. And I was like bent over like a little retaining wall, like having a contraction while he parked. And then we went inside, like I was bent over in pain at that point. That's how painful it was. I went up to triage, I walked in, I was just like, I'm having contractions, I'm in labor, I was here 24 hours ago, I know what's happening, admit me, basically. I want an epidural now. I wanted a C-section, I wanted no pain, not no pain, but like I wanted no pain birth. I know there's a recovery, but the birth, I wanted no pain. So I was like, give me the epidural, hire me vet, you know, like priority. And the midwife on staff was the most incompetent woman I've ever met. Every other midwife I worked with, fantastic. This lady, oh my God, so slow. I got a triage bed. First thing she said was how attractive Daniel was, and I was like, this is unbelievably inappropriate and unhelpful. I was like, cool, cool, cool. I'm glad he's attractive. Help me. That's what got us into this situation. Anyways, yeah, so then she admitted me. She gave me, they were like, gas and air. Here's some gas and air. I wasn't doing anything. I was like rolling in pain, going, aah! And I turned to Daniel and I was like, I'm not that in pain that much. I'm just doing it so I get the epidural faster, but I was actually in quite a lot of pain. I was just trying to say that to make Daniel feel better so he didn't stress. They put the cannula in my hand. I don't think there's any beds available. I work in the NHS. I'm a medical professional healthcare worker. I know that August is the time when all the consultants go on holiday. So giving birth in August was not ideal because no one important was around. It was all of the like minor staff. The other day that is the worst to go into labour is Saturday, because it's a weekend. Once again, those people who are around are not. And then also the middle of the night, when once again, nobody is around. So like this was like what they can do, and if you give birth in like the middle of the day, they'll pull an anesthesiologist from another theatre, they can find people, but there's just nothing happening at 4 a.m. Oh God, it was terrible. So yeah, I was in quite a lot of pain. and then to be honest, my memory gets a bit blank and fuzzy here. So you're gonna get, it kind of feels like, you know, when you go drinking and you get like flashes of stuff happening and you don't remember, I was in this club and then I was in this club, but I don't remember how I got to this club. It's very much that in my memory. So at some point I threw up, I knew that. I threw up when I was in the triage, and then I somehow got into a gown. I don't remember getting changed. I remember the gas and air ran out, and so I was like trying to suck it and there was nothing coming out, even though I thought it didn't do anything, and it may have been the thing that made me throw up, I don't really know. Anyway, then they put me in a wheelchair, and this woman was so slow, the crap midwife, she was so terrible. So she was like so slow to get anyone to help me. Then she was like getting the gas and air and she was like moving like so slow and then like failing to put the plug in, and Daniel's like, let me do it, oh my god. Like just every single thing was so slow. And then it was empty anyway, so she needed to get another one, and then, oh my god, I'm still scarred. Anyways, then they put me in a wheelchair and they wheeled me to this room, and I don't know what it is. I think it may have been a private birthing suite because it was, or a private room, because I don't think there was any birthing suites available maybe, I'm not 100% sure. I was only there for a second. They put me on the bed, and then this other midwife came in and she was Australian, and I'm like having contractions with this gas and air, and I'm like, are you Australian? And she's like, I am. And I'm like, where are you from? And she's like, I'm from Brisbane. Are you from Brisbane? I'm like, no, I'm from Sydney. And she's like, do you live in Clapham? And I'm like, no, I don't. So we're having this conversation. And then she was like, I'm gonna get you an anesthesiologist, because I kept saying epidural, epidural. I hadn't, the only word I was saying. And she was like, I'm gonna get you someone. And she ran off and she went into theatres and she found someone. And then she came back and she's like, yep, they're gonna come and we're gonna get you into a birthing suite. And so she said, do you want to be wheeled in the bed or in the wheelchair? And I said, what's faster? And she said, the chair. So I was like, we're getting in the chair. So they put me in the wheelchair, and they tried to put the blanket on me for like modesty and decency, and I was like, absolutely out the window. I never even had any when I walked in, let's be honest. So they were wheeling me and I was having another contraction. I remember like pushing myself up and like screaming as they're running me down the hallway, like quite a guttural scream. Because I was very much of the opinion, I'm not going to suppress my pain, because until I get an epidural, this is everyone's problem, okay? So that was my attitude. And then I finally got to my birthing suite. Yay, we can finally start giving birth. I was having the absolute most insane contractions. It was the most pain I've ever been in. And then it got to 8 a.m. I think, no, it wasn't even 8 a.m. at this point. Like the whole thing, this has been like a few hours. I got to the birthing suite. They were setting me up and I was like, anesthesiologist. Still painkillers, painkillers, pain, epi was what I was saying. They finally got me, the anesthesiologist came in, she was putting the stuff on my back, and then to figure out the correct dosage, I guess they needed my blood pressure. Guess which midwife failed to take my blood pressure 3 times. And like at this point, I'm getting contractions every 2 minutes. So this is costing me pain. Okay, pain because of this woman's incompetence. She failed on the machine, then she failed again because it was set for twins. The person before me must have had twins. Then she went and got a second machine and still failed, and then another nurse came in and did it for her. Truly, oh my god. And then, so anyways, then she put the stuff on my back for the epidural. I'm very, like I said, I'm very medical, so I'm not that scared of needles or the epidural. That wasn't a point of concern for me. I wanted it 3 hours ago. They couldn't even check me. They couldn't check how much I was dilated, for the record. There's a reason I haven't said that, is because I was squirming and in pain so much that they couldn't actually check. So then they were doing the thing on my back and she was about to put it in, and I said, do you need to tell me, because I remembered from I did antenatal classes, and I was like, do you need me to tell you if I'm about to have a contraction? And she goes, yes, tell me, because I'd move and then I could go, paralyzed. And I said, I'm about to have one, and it was quite a bad one. I'd say it was maybe the worst one I had. I had my arms like that around Daniel and his shoulder was like here. And I was like, I bit him and I was gonna bite harder to be like, for the full amount of pain I was in. And then I was like, don't do that. You're literally gonna make him bleed if you do that. So don't do that. So I didn't, I resisted, but the scream I let out was like a proper horror movie, high pitched. I don't yell, I'm not a screamer. I'm very demure, very mindful. This was not. I was like, like it was proper. Anyways, once that was over, she then put the needle in, put the epidural in, and then she set me back up and gave me the button and said you can top up every 15 minutes or 17 minutes or something. And then Daniel had a timer on his phone to go off every 17 minutes so that he could press the button, because he was like, we're not doing that again. And so yeah, after it was on, then they checked my cervix to see how much I was dilated. And I was 10 centimeters dilated. So I was almost ready to push. So I did the whole birth by accident without an epidural, because I went in at 4 a.m. and this was 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. 9 a.m. I think it was. So I fully dilated in 5 hours, which was, so, you know, it's not the quickest. Like, there are quicker people, I'm absolutely aware of that. They always say your first is going to be longer, although they did warn me when I was in the triage on the Wednesday when my water broke, that really good consultant, she did say, if you go into labour, it's going to be fast. I don't know why she knows that, but she was right, because it should take a lot longer for your first. So unfortunately I did apparently the most painful part of birth is dilating from 9 to 10 centimeters, which I suspect was that big scream I had. And then once I had the epidural, I was much calmer. It kind of felt like I had pins and needles in my legs. And then, I don't know, I was so disassociated from my lower half, like, because I couldn't feel it anymore. So I didn't really, like, people coming in and look at me, and I was like, yeah, check it. They kept being so polite. They're like, I'm like, do you mind if I have a look at your vagina? I was like, please, someone look at it. Please. Just like, deal with it. So they were looking at it. Then there was this issue with him, his head was turned. So instead of coming out straight, he'd already caused enough problems at this point. Instead of coming out, you know, like this, how they normally come out, he was turned. So his head is obviously wider than it is like this or like this. So it was the widest point. So a doctor came in and she tried to straighten his head up, and that didn't work, like manually with her hand. She tried to straighten it and then he turned it back. And we sat there for a while, and at this point my midwife changed. I got rid of the terrible midwife. She made sure to tell me how good looking Daniel was again on her way out. And I was like, fabulous, thank you so much for your help, bye. Goodbye. I had a new midwife. She was lovely. She was called Henry, and she kept saying my brother to the to Hugo. And I also had a student midwife there. And they were filling out all the paperwork because obviously it was quite fast. I must have been called in for it because she was like a casual, but she was still fantastic. She worked for ages. She's just casual now. And then we just sat there for a while, just kind of chilling out. I have some video and stuff of that. So, because that was the only time I was like even remotely calm. I think I stayed like that for about 45 minutes to an hour, which was, because I think once you have the epidural, it slows everything down. And then I said to Daniel, I think I'm going to be sick. And I threw up again. And the midwife was like, that means it's time to push, apparently. So then we got into position, and then I tried pushing and he wasn't coming out, probably because his head was sideways. I just couldn't do it. I pushed for a long time. I pushed for, I think, 45 minutes, which is way too long. You're meant to push for like, 10 minutes. Then at some point, the monitor dropped for the baby, his heart rate dropped, and that's when all of the specialists flood the room. I will say, I wasn't that scared, because I was just like, I'm in the hospital, couldn't be in a better place. I was pretty chill. Daniel was a bit nervous. He was like, it got a bit scary when all the specialists ran in, I'll be honest. And so what they did was they tried the suction cap on him to try and pull him out, and he wouldn't come out. Once again, I maintained his head was sideways, so that's why it was just like, not gonna come. And then they used the forceps, which means an episiotomy, which means they cut you, and they used the big forceps, and I think they straightened his head, and that's how they could get him out. And so he came out. And once they pulled him out, it was like so much relief. I heard him cry, and that made me cry because I was so stressed that he couldn't breathe because he was so preterm. That was my biggest fear, was that he would have to go to NICU, which I know is not the end of the world, but like, you envision the birth of your child, and you envision having that moment holding them, and then like going back to the room and all that stuff. And I was just like, I don't want to have to get to a NICU or have him in a box, that would be the worst outcome. That would be a very bad outcome for me. So I heard him cry, and I was like, oh my god, relief. He can breathe, he's okay. I think I said he's okay was my main thing. and they put him on me. I have videos of that. I don't know if I can show them because I'm covered in blood, but we'll see. They immediately tried to get him to latch onto me. I was getting milked by the midwife. She's like proper like milking me, trying to get something out, trying to get colostrum or something for the baby. And then they took him away, they wrapped him up, and then I had all of the specialists come over and go, okay, so we have to take you to theatres I don't know what they told me, but it was essentially to sew me up. They're like, the baby's out, I'm ecstatic, I'm just like, he's so well breathing, everything else we can deal with, you know, I was so relaxed. So they were like, we have to take you to theatres, and I was like, fine, do what you want to do, I don't care anymore, this is over. The pain is over. Well, the pain was not over, spoilers, but I thought the pain was over. So they took me to theatres, and they gave me a spinal, which is what you have when you have a C-section, so I properly couldn't feel anything in my legs, couldn't walk at this point. They left the baby with Daniel. I was in surgery for 2 hours because they had to sew me up because I had a 3rd-degree tear, an episiotomy, and I think I must have had internal bleeding or something. So they took out the placenta there, which I didn't get to see. I really wanted to see my placenta. And then it was really surreal for me, who works in operating theatres, to be on the table, but that was, and because I took so long, Daniel literally sent the midwife, the student midwife, to come check on me because he was like, thought I may have died. He was so stressed. He was just sitting there with this little tiny baby being like, oh my God. So I will say I wish I had that golden time with them, and I wasn't in surgery, but everyone was okay, and that's all I can really ask for. Got wheeled back to my birthing suite. I got to see Daniel and meet the baby properly. I got to have a cuddle. I was like shouting as they wheeled me out at the room saying feed him formula. Like I know some people are like, I just want a breastfeeding, because he was so preemie. I was so insecure about his weight. I was like, give him anything. Like I just want him to be a good weight. I ended up combi feeding, which we can get into another time, which I really enjoyed. So I'm not particularly fussed on formula or breast milk, you know, fed is best. I was going to try breastfeeding, but at that moment I wanted him to be fed and start putting on weight, basically. He was hypoglycemic, so they had to give him some sugar liquid, which they gave him. But then we just stayed in the room. We got to stay in the room for a long time. It was quite nice. I think they just didn't have any beds available. Once again, NHS. But we had a private birthing suite, which is obviously you'd expect. But so we had this massive private room to ourselves, and we got to stay there, I'd say, until like 4 or 5 o'clock. So I rang my mum to tell her and show her the baby. I think it was like 3 a.m. their time, because they had to come over early. And yeah, that was the nicest time, I'd say, because I wasn't in pain. I had spinal still, so I couldn't move. So I had the catheter in as well, which didn't hurt. It was fine. And yeah, so that was the nicest time, just having cuddles, and like that was my golden time. So then they moved us to a shared ward, which I think this is the point of contention most people seem to have when they talk about the NHS, is that you don't get private rooms. You can probably pay for a private room. I was just so shell-shocked and traumatized that I was like, I want to be around as many people as possible, to be completely honest. Because if something happened, one of them could get someone. Do you know what I mean? I don't know. I was not okay. I lost 900 milliliters of blood, so like almost a litre, and to get a transfusion you need to lose a litre, so 100 mils. And the way they do that is they just guess, so like they could have been off. I could have needed a transfusion. I was very pale. So Daniel stayed overnight. He got to stay with me on the ward. The biggest problem with the ward is that the babies wake each other up, and then the other biggest problem is that the dads who stay on the ward often snore, and that upset me. But you have your own bathroom for your little room area. There's a shower. I didn't do anything the first night. They bring you food. The food is so, like, it's fine. I'm not complaining about the quality of the food. It's like, it's decent food. No way is that my complaint. My complaint is that I was so constipated because of all the painkillers, and they were giving me the most like fiber negative foods and so stodgy and like backing you up foods. I was like, why are you doing this to me? And they would bring breakfast in and stuff. And so then the next morning I woke up, the pain started. I could only really shuffle around, even though, once again, I had a natural birth. I didn't have a C-section. I know some people are like, I was running down the stairs, and I was like, I was in so much pain. I could only lay on one side. So my episiotomy was on my right side, so I could only lay on my left, and the baby was on my right. So to get to the baby, I had to roll out of bed and then hobble around the bed to get to him. And Daniel was there anyway, so he was able to get to the baby much faster. So he did a lot of the stuff. I basically, to cut a long story short, didn't really change any nappies or do much feeding at all in the first week. Daniel did literally everything because I couldn't. That's how much pain I was in. I couldn't bend over, I couldn't do anything. The constipation was by far the worst pain I ever had because I was like stitched to high heaven down there, and I had a really, really bad hemorrhoid from the pushing. One like that literally lasted 6 months. I didn't have a pain-free poo for 6 months. I'm not exaggerating at all. If anything, I'm under exaggerating. They took the catheter out the next day. That was fine. No dramas there. You have to do a urine sample to prove you can use the toilet. That was all fine. I was moved into a semi-high-risk ward because he was preemie. We moved into like, it wasn't a NICU, but it was all babies that got extra checks. So say they come around every 3 hours, they'd come around every hour basically to check the babies. They checked my bloods, they checked the heart rate, they checked all of those. He did end up having jaundice, so he had to go to the NICU for one night. And I walked over there once, but it just took me so long I couldn't go there the rest of the time. But he was really responsive to the therapy. I was jaundiced and I was 42 weeks, so I don't even know if that was the prematureness of it. We thought he was just tanned, to be honest. I was really sad that night because it was just like another thing. I'd had so many things go wrong in this pregnancy, and then the birth didn't go to plan, and then now my baby wasn't there. I was just like, it's just another thing. Probably the hormones as well, if I'm being honest. But this is the thing, the baby blues. I'm like, I also just went through a really traumatic thing. Is that not justifiable to cry? I don't know. So we were in there. So I gave birth on the Saturday morning the 10th. I got discharged Tuesday night, the following Tuesday. So Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. I was there for 4 days, depending on how you count. We left Tuesday night. We got home. The first night was like so bad that we just didn't sleep because we were so scared, and we changed his formula, so he was very upset. We shouldn't have done that. That was a bad idea. And then my parents arrived Wednesday morning, and then Daniel went and got them, and they were very helpful because I couldn't do anything. I was in such a bad way. I couldn't sit how I am now, sitting upright. Couldn't sit for 4 weeks. I'm not exaggerating. I laid and watched Survivor, the like American reality TV show, because I needed to see people having a worse time than me. Because like they didn't even have a bed. I was like, well, at least I have a bed. At least I have, etc. So that was what I did, and my coping mechanism. My mum got up, and I couldn't even like walk up and down the stairs holding the baby. In terms of the NHS, you have midwives come and they come to your house and they check the baby and they check you, and then once the baby's back at their birth weight, they stop coming to see you and they sign you off. They also do a debrief of like, do you want to talk about what happened with your birth, to like process things, which I didn't do because I kind of know, like they're just going to tell me why they use the forceps, and I know why they use the forceps, you know, so I didn't do that. You also have health visitors come to see the baby, and they check their growth and check that you're not being negligent and that their needs are being met and that you're not, you know, postnatal depression, anything like that. So I will say the care postnatally was really good in terms of like having house visits and people coming to check on you and the baby. And I had them check my stitches because I was like so paranoid that something down there was going to get infected. So anytime midwife came, I was like, please look, please look. And they also answer any questions you have. It was really, really good. So is it still safe? I think giving birth on the NHS is safe. If I had my birth in a private hospital, they don't really have an emergency department. So I would have had to go to an NHS hospital anyway, because they only really do like scheduled things. So the fact that I was, you know, having an emergency situation, that wouldn't have gone well. They also don't have copious amounts of stock of things, so I can't say that all of the tools that they used on me in the recovery or on the baby, that they would have had those, because they were very niche. So I am glad I was on the NHS and I wasn't in a private hospital for that reason, because I would have had in a C-section booked in a private room, and I don't know if I would have had those because of the circumstances. That said, is there room for improvement? Yes. One, that midwife who kept telling me how attractive Daniel was and being so slow, she needs to go. I'm so sorry. Put her on admin duty or something. Get her away from the patients. So that, absolutely. And then also staffing. I think that was my biggest issue. And the beds. August is like one of the most common months for birthdays. So a lot of my problems was there was no staff from an anesthesiologist. There was no bed to put me in, so I was stuck in triage. And once I was in labor and I was in the correct bed, and the team was amazing. I had a really good team once I was there, but getting there was really hard. Also, I think from a midwife perspective, in the lead up to the prenatal things, the midwife appointments, they could have been a bit more thorough. And once again, I went to a very, very good hospital, so I can only imagine the variance of care if you go to somewhere a bit more regional, okay? Like, I think I should have been scanned. I think the glucose test should be standard. I think there should have been more attention paid to my OCT, or my itchy legs, or those symptoms. My biggest issue is that I still don't know why I had a preterm labour. He was born at basically 36 weeks. It was 35 plus 6, so it's 36 weeks. Which isn't horrific. 37 is full term in the UK. So I'm aware I was lucky. He had no real intervention, like nothing horrific considering. It was all fairly standard, although a lot of the tears plus the episiotomies are not common. I had a lot of uncommon things, but they're all within the realm of normal. But yeah, I would love to have known why, so I can avoid it next time if I have a second child. And I also wish, once I was admitted into a birthing suite, I have no complaints. I felt very looked after. Everyone was professional, amazing. All my needs were looked after. I felt cared for. I truly believe, I know I had a lot of problematic things happen in my birth, but I don't think that was anyone's fault. I think that was biology. It is what it is. I will say I went in with the attitude of this is a medical experience. This is, like, I know they kind of sometimes sell birth to you as, you know, you can have a water birth and music and fairy lights and incense and candles, and I didn't really do all that. I was just like, I'm trying not to die, and that is my goal here. I did have a playlist that we never got to play. That was the only thing I really did. But I think if you had my birth experience, but you went in with the expectations of the previous, of like, you know, fairy lights and things, I think you may have some postnatal depression because the way you built it up was not what you imagined. But yeah, I was very much like, just get me and the baby out healthy, and so that was fine. But yeah, so I think the takeaway is like, and this is private, public, whatever, is like definitely just like, they're suggestions, not guarantees. Remember, like, this is like, it's an ideal, but don't hope for that. Expect it not to happen, just because then if it does, you're happy. And yeah, so my issues are extra screening tests and more staffing, because I think I could have been admitted faster and some issues could have been flagged earlier. But when in the birthing suite, fab, no complaints, everyone was fantastic, and my recovery wasn't great, but that was no one's fault, biology. The midwife and health visitor checks were really, really helpful, and so nice to have a touch point to say, I'm worried about this, or I'm not sure about this. He started doing this. I was really nervous about his breathing at one point, so I filmed his breathing, and then I showed the health visitor, and she was like, I think it's fine, don't worry. Like, but having that so you don't get in your head, so great, so great. If I had paid £6,000 to £9,000 to go private, would my experience be any different? I think the only difference would be maybe the screening checks, but then maybe nothing would have come from those. So, you know, we never really know, and I definitely would have had a private room. So you can decide if that's worth it to you. I think the specialists, if I was to go private, I would be going to a private wing within an NHS hospital so they can share resources. I wouldn't be going to a private hospital personally. So there's definitely an argument for that. Going private within the NHS. If I ever win the lottery, maybe next time I can do that. It would be an interesting experience. I'd like to compare, actually, for science. See if the other one goes better, who knows. But yeah, so if you're wondering what giving birth on the NHS is really like, this is my long version of my birth story, so you fully understand exactly what's involved. Equal parts miracle and equal parts madness in the end. If you've given birth, please tell me in the comments. I want to know, because I find it so interesting with the postcode lottery of where everyone is in their experiences that vary. So tell me in the comments how your experience did it compare to mine, better, worse. And if you're about to give birth, everyone tells you to pack snacks, and I was going to tell you to pack snacks, but to be honest, I was so uninterested in food at the end of it I didn't even eat my snacks. So bring a pillow. That's my advice. The hospital pillows suck. Bring another pillow. Bring your birth pillow. I brought my pregnancy pillow. It was the best thing we had. 10 out of 10. So you've got this. Pack some laxatives. That's what you actually need. Thank you so much for watching, and subscribe for more life in the UK videos, motherhood, and maybe a little bit of luxury thrown in.